First lesson that we talked about tonight was how to reach your neighbor, and just paying attention to the small things, going the extra mile in your relationship. It was more a lesson about relationships and just doing small things. This one's going to vary a little bit, but along the same line, because this is what we struggle with. We struggle with, how do I talk to my neighbor? It's sometimes it's awkward. And then, how do I talk to people who are lost? I want to, and I hope they bring it up so that I can talk about it, but I don't feel comfortable talking about it. And so I want to give you some strategies to reaching the lost in this lesson. And it's going to come straight from the Bible. Let me start with this illustration. A number of years ago, the story's told about a church that, well, I see you guys don't have flowers in front of your pulpit, but a lot of places, have you noticed, you go in, they've got a big flower arrangement in front of the podium, and they had the same flowers up, and would be fine with me because I don't pay attention to that kind of stuff, but there were ladies in the congregation, and they were like, we've had those flowers for so long, we have to do something different. They need to decorate, and so they got together, the ladies did, and I mean, they pooled their resources well over $1,000 and bought this huge flower arrangement. It had a pedestal that it sat on, concrete, and it was nice. It was beautiful, and they were so proud of it the first Sunday. They were just thrilled. It made the preacher look prettier too, and it was great. Next week, they come to church, and when they came in the building, they didn't see their flower arrangement. Now, those of you, I mean, if you're not accustomed to being around the church a lot, sometimes people have weddings, and they do all kinds of things. You know, they move stuff, and well, it's a long story, and sometimes you have to go looking for things to put back when things are over with. So they thought, well, maybe somebody just did something, I don't know. And so the women looked around, they couldn't find it. So they went to the elders and said, could you ask the janitor to check on the flowers? And so they checked on the janitor, went in every room. He came back and reported to the elders, said, I don't know where the flower arrangement is, but it is not in the building. I've checked every nook and cranny. It is not here. So they told the ladies, and the ladies were quite upset about that, and they thought, well, what is somebody doing? I mean, was there an outdoor wedding? Somebody just took the liberty of taking it and wanted to have it, and they waited, couldn't find it. So they put in the bulletin, whoever took the flower arrangement, would you bring it back? We need it. It was expensive. It's not really intended to leave the building. Nobody brought it back. They did a phone tree, where, that automated call, everybody in the church gets the phone call. Hey, we're missing the flower. If you brought it back, nothing will be said. Just please bring it back. Let us know. And they explained. Nobody responded to that. A month goes by. They don't know where that flower arrangement is. The whole church is talking about that flower arrangement and what in the world could have happened to it. Everybody's accusations are being thrown around, a little bit, and all kinds of people haven't figured out who they think did it. And so one Sunday they came back to church, and the flower arrangement was in front of the pulpit. Oh, our flowers back. What in the world happened? And everybody, it's the buzz of the church. And so the preacher gets up, and he says, I have a confession to make. I'm the one that took the flowers. Everybody's in shock that the preacher would have done this. And he said, and let me tell you why I did it. Because from the time I did it till today, we've talked about nothing else here. We have talked about this missing flower arrangement. We've made phone calls. We've investigated. We've made accusations. We have sent emails. We've put in the bulletin. We've made public announcements every single week about this missing flower arrangement. It has consumed us. And I want to ask you all a question. When are you going to care for lost souls as much as you do a lost flower arrangement? Ouch. Then they fired him. And no, I don't know how that story ends. Maybe like that. But I'll tell you what, that's a good point, isn't it? Why and how can we get so caught up about lost things and not lost people? And that's what I want to talk about. I want us to care. See, do you know what the Great Commission is? What's the Great Commission? Go into all the world and preach the gospel. By the way, Barna just did a research poll. Of those who are millennials, that are categorized as millennials, did you know that only 10% of millennials know what the Great Commission is? And then did you know that when it was explained to them, they also asked them, should we be doing it? And 47% said it's a sin to try to push your religion on somebody else. We shouldn't even fulfill the Great Commission. That doesn't bode well for the church of the future. But anyway, we know what the Great Commission is. We do. And we know where we can find it. Matthew 28, 19 and 20. Mark 16, 15 and 16. Luke 24, 46 and 47. John 20 and verse 21. All those passages talk about God has sent me, and so I'm sending you. We've got to go preach the gospel to the whole world. Baptize those who believe. We get that. And whenever a preacher stands up and says, well, today's sermon is on evangelism, we're off on our mental vacation. You know, we're like, yeah, I know. I've heard that 1,000 times already. It's not that we don't know we have to do it. And most of the sermons that we hear preached on evangelism, what we're doing is telling people who already know they're supposed to do it. They don't need that. They know the verses. They can quote the verses. What they need is motivation and tell me how. How am I supposed to do it? A number of years ago when I was living in Kentucky, now that's quite a ways. Kentucky has a pretty decent basketball team. I'm sure you know of that, right? You've heard of that. But Kentucky bleeds blue. I mean, these people, they love their Kentucky Wildcats. Okay, well, we added on to the church building, and we were going to have an open house, and it was Saturday night, and I was going through the building just checking things, and I'd gone up on the third floor of our church building, and they had done a mural in the children's library. It's beautiful and all this, but they left the paint cans up there. There were 6 paint cans where they had done like a rainbow and the ark and all that. And so I said, well, now we had an elevator, and I said, I can carry these 6 paint cans downstairs, just ride the elevator. It'd be all right. I got 2 steps out of the library, and the top can of paint toppled off and landed on the corner and popped the lid off and splattered. You know what UT orange looks like? Not University of Texas, University of Tennessee. Texas is at least burnt orange. This is like puke orange, in Tennessee. It's not the best color. But anyway, a gallon of that just started oozing out on our brand new, having never been walked on carpet. It splattered on the wall. The next day is our open house. And when I saw that spreading, like my first thought was, just run and come in and act like you're shocked in the morning. What has happened? My second thought is, oh, they're going to fire me. I had to have some calmer moments, and then I finally I got a wet dry vac and worked for hours and finally got it up to where you really couldn't tell that something happened there, but you could on the wall. But anyway, my point was not, no one needed to tell me, you got a problem. I knew I had a problem. I just didn't know how to fix it. And we're really probably not doing a whole lot of help when we tell people, you do know you got to go preach the gospel to the whole world. You have heard of the Great Commission, right? Everybody knows that among us. What they don't know is, how do I go about doing it? Help me to do it. I get it. I have the obligation. I know the what of it. I just need to know the how of it, and maybe in some respect the why of it. And so I want to do that with you for the next 20 or so minutes. I want to give you the how, or the why and the how. Here's why we should do it. And I had two your outline, 2 points. I'm going to just focus on one of them, though. Number one, because there are lost people. Not everybody, don't believe what you hear at funerals. Everybody's not going to heaven. Have you ever been to a funeral where somebody didn't go to heaven? You know, everybody goes to heaven if you go to a funeral. That's not the truth. There are people who will be lost. They will not go to heaven. In fact, what does Jesus say in Matthew 7? There will be more or fewer of them than who go to heaven. There will be more who will be lost than those who will be saved. So this, if I need a motivation, the motivation is there are people who are lost. And the second motivation is to understand what it means to be lost. I don't know that we give enough thought to that. In Hebrews chapter 10, the writer of the book says, in the Old Testament, if you sin, you would be punished and maybe lose your life. And then he says, but of how much sorer, this is worse, degrees, of how much sorer punishment do you suppose those worthy who have trodden underfoot the sacrifice of the Son of God, who have counted his blood as a common thing, and who have insulted the Spirit of his grace? In other words, he's saying, do you really think that God is going to let you get by with insulting his Spirit of grace, to basically just wipe your feet on the sacrifice of Jesus like you would on a carpet or on a rug before you went in the house? Do you think that you can treat the blood of Jesus as no big deal, just a common thing? Listen, if you die like that, God is not a God of love and justice and peace and grace and pity and all those things. You will be a sinner in the hands of an angry God. He goes on in that same chapter and says that those who continue to sin have nothing to look forward to except for a fearful expectation of judgment. It's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. And listen, I know people who have died outside of Christ, my friends, and I can't do anything about it. And when I think of what they face, it literally sometimes turns my stomach. Like I get sick thinking about it. I had a friend I grew up with and played ball with, and he was killed on a motorcycle wreck when we were still in high school. I had gone to practice. I saw the ambulance go by, and in the middle of practice, one of the fathers came in and pulled me off the court and said, I've got some bad news. Your friend died. I was shocked. When I stood at the head of the casket with his mom and dad, I remember people coming by saying, God needed another angel. He's at peace now. You know, those kinds of statements. But that's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. He's lost. There's no hope for him. He was not a child of God. And he was old enough to know the difference between right and wrong. And I'm not his judge, but I do know what the Bible says about those who die outside of Jesus. And he didn't have Jesus. And since the day I started preaching till today, tonight, I tell people about this friend who right now is experiencing horrors that I can't imagine, and nothing can be done for him. I had a friend that called me from high school, hadn't talked to him in 30 years, and he called me about 4 or 5 years ago. And, well, he didn't call. He sent an email. And here's what the email said. I was called Higgy, Higginbotham. Nobody's going to say Higginbotham. But he said, Higgy, I'm dying. Please pray for my family. Now, 30 years earlier, we were best friends. Again, we played ball together and all that kind of stuff and ran around together in high school. And I got that email, and I responded to him once, and I said, man, I've got to talk to him. He was dying of cancer, and he's not a Christian. And I said, I've got to talk to him. And I let it slip my mind. I'm 30 years separated from him. I'm not living in West Virginia anymore. We didn't talk regularly. And I let it slip my mind until the day I got on Facebook and it said, my friend died. And then I got sick at my stomach again. And I prayed to God for forgiveness because my friend went into eternity unprepared to meet his God. And I knew that would happen, and I didn't intervene. And, I asked God for forgiveness, and I don't want to do that ever again. I know a friend of mine who was a preacher. He's now deceased. Maybe some of you would know his name if I mentioned it, but I heard him tell one time that he had been in a gospel meeting, had just gotten home. He'd been studying with some neighbors down the road before he had gone in the meeting and was trying to teach them the gospel. And he got home and he saw that the man had called, left a message on the answering machine. And he just said, I'm not going to answer. He just got home. He was tired. He wanted to go out with his wife, go to dinner. And so they just let the machine take it, and they left. And when they came home, they forgot. He didn't remember the message or anything. They went to bed. 5 o'clock in the morning, he got a phone call from that man's wife. And she said, can you come over to my house? My husband just died. So he went over to the house, but before he went over to the house, he remembered he called right before we went to supper last night. He hits his recorder on his answer machine. You know what the man said? I've come to the decision I need to be baptized. Give me a call. And he never called him back. And he died that night. Let me tell you one more account that happened to me. A lady came in church one night and said, I'm so excited, Steve. My husband has come to church. He has never come to church with me ever. And I was like, oh, wow. Because tonight I'm preaching on what must I do to be saved. And I thought, this is like a God thing. This is providence. And he sat in the balcony of the building. And I preached. Sometimes you preach a sermon and you preach to everybody, but not that night. I preached to that guy dead center in the balcony. I said everything I could just for him. It wasn't for anybody else. And I was hopeful, and the invitation song was sung, and he didn't come forward. But I was encouraged. And his wife came out as they were leaving. He had already gone out the door. She said, I'm just so excited by this. 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call, and it was that lady. And she said, Steve, come to the house. My husband died. It was as if God said, I'll give you one final chance. I don't know. But I know he died outside of Christ. People are lost. They're dying without the gospel and without a Savior, and there's no hope for them. And beyond that, I don't know what I have to offer you to get motivated to go talk to people about their soul. Heaven and hell hang in the balance. And well, to an extent, I'm responsible. Do you remember what Paul said in Acts chapter 20 when he said, listen, I have not shunned to declare unto you the whole counsel of God. I've kept back nothing that was profitable for you. Therefore, I am free from what? The blood of all men. That imagery is taken from Ezekiel, where Ezekiel talked about a watchman that's put on the wall, and if the enemy comes, he's to blow the trumpet and warn everybody. And if somebody dies in the battle, well, it's not his fault because he warned. But if he's the watchman and he doesn't blow the trumpet, the blood of those who die will be on his head. And if we don't tell people about Jesus and they die without him, their blood is on us. We've got to at least say, if we tell them and they die without Jesus, it's on them. But if we don't tell them, it's on us. And so I don't know what else would motivate me. We need to be reminded, not just, hey, go preach the gospel. The Bible says so. We need to understand why. Because people are losing their souls every day. Now, how do we do it? That's the part I want to spend the rest of the time with. How do we do it? Well, first thing is this. Quit talking about it and do it. How many classes and seminars and training sessions and whatevers that we go through, how many of them do we need before we ever go out and do it? I'm not knocking training sessions and all those things. Those are good. But if we never get out of the training session, I'm for getting rid of the training sessions. Just go talk to people about Jesus. What training sessions, how many of you are grandparents in here? Got a few of you. What training session or what program do you go through that gets you to talk about your grandkids? Because you do, right? I mean, it's no big deal to talk about your grandkids, right? You do that freely. So what's the seminar? What's the name? I'd like to know. Yeah, waking up. You don't need to go to a seminar. Grandparents don't go to a special course. You know why they talk about their grandkids? Because they love them. It means more than anything to them. And we don't need seminars to talk about Jesus if we loved him and if he meant more to us than anything else in the world. I get it. We need to be skilled and we need to hone our skills. I'm not belittling that. Don't take it to the extreme. Those things are good. We need to have training sessions. What I don't like is training, and never going out and doing it. We need to get the gospel to the lost. Just do it. What Nike slogan? We should have capitalized on that before they did. Just do it. There are things that we can do that just, let me share something we did a number of years ago. When I was preaching in Glasgow, Kentucky, I preached there for 21 years before we moved to Tennessee. We had a congregation of 450, a little more than that, but there was a lot of lethargy. There was a lot of lukewarmness. And we would have a dabbling of people that would respond to the invitation through the year, and some people would be baptized, but I knew that there was a whole lot more people that needed to respond than were responding. And so one Sunday I got up and I preached a sermon on the invitation. And when I finished that sermon, I said, for now on, here at this church, no one's going to respond alone. We made that walk down the aisle like the gauntlet of shame. And we made that person walk all by themselves, and they come up and they sit on a pew all by themselves, and everybody just stands and looks at them until the end of the song, until somebody goes over me and takes their confession, and it was hard to do. And I said, we're not going to do that anymore. For now on, no one will ever respond alone here because we're family and we love each other. The very next Sunday, you want to know what happened? A lady came down from the very back down that aisle, walked up, sat down. No one moved. It was kind of like showdown at the OK Corral, you know. I mean, I had just preached this sermon, and no one did what I said. And I don't do this, but I did it this day. I turned around and I stopped the song leader. And I said, before he sings that final verse of the song, I want to remind you, I said last week, and I meant it, no one is ever going to respond by themselves here anymore. And maybe you didn't see your sister respond to the invitation this morning, but she did. And if you love her, you'll come up and express your love to her. And I said, now go ahead and finish this last song. And there were 6 or 7 women who came up and embraced, and man, they cried. I mean, there was open weeping. This woman was so touched by that. I had people come to me after church and say, I have just found my ministry in this church. You can count on me to be one of the people who come up whenever anyone responds. This is my niche. I can do this. You know what? In the next 6 weeks, we had over 60 people respond to the invitation. We had almost 20 baptisms on not 60 people, and then there were 20 more who were baptized. It was like we took the lid off. People were sitting in their pews knowing, I need to do this, but I don't feel safe or whatever. I don't want to make that walk by myself. But as soon as they saw, we're not going to judge you, we're going to love on you. People just came by the masses, by the droves. And it was all because we did something about it. We could just have kept on going another 21 years like we were, with no one saying anything and people sitting in their seats who were sitting there thinking, I really need prayers, but I'm not going to get out of my pew. Do something. Don't just sit around and talk about it and think about it and plan about it. Do it. Also this, stop worrying about saying the wrong thing. That's what I hear. Oh, I would do it, but I don't know what I'd say. I might say the wrong thing. I might make things worse. I might hurt somebody's feelings, and because they don't know the right thing to say, they excuse themselves from reaching out to the lost. Listen, it's not so much about knowing the right thing to say. It's about speaking. It's about showing someone you care. People will have a loved one die. If you're waiting for the right thing to say to make that like feel all better and good for them, you'll be waiting a long time. You don't have the right words for that moment. There's nothing you can say that will take their pain away. But go be there and just say, I'm sorry. We love you. We're praying for you. Those words don't take the pain away. They don't fix their loss, but they make a difference. And I'm just saying, when it comes to evangelism, quit worrying about being this master orator that you've just got to say everything just right or you might blow it. Just speak the truth in love, and that'll work. We had a guy who stopped coming to church a while back, and I went to the elders and I said, what's going on with him? And they had lost track of him too. And so I wrote him a text message and I said, hey, so-and-so, this is Steve. I didn't know what to say to him. I didn't even know why he was gone. I just knew he was gone. And I knew that he might be offended by my message, and might turn him off even more, whatever. Might be mad because it took me like 4 weeks to notice or something. I don't know. So I was like in that, I don't know what to say, but I just went ahead and I said, hey, so-and-so, this is Steve, and I've been missing you, and I don't know what's going on in your life, but I do care. And I'd like to talk to you about it. Can you give me a call? That's all I said. I got a text the next day, and it was from a woman. And she said, apparently the person you were trying to text yesterday changed his number because I now have this number. It came to me. So the guy didn't receive it that you were sending it to. But I just was touched by what you said. I don't know you and I don't know the guy, but I would love to go to a church where someone cares for me. I didn't have right words. I just told the guy I cared. And somebody, a third party that doesn't even know anybody and anything, just said, that's what I'm looking for. Someone who just loves me and cares about my soul. We don't have to say the right words. Let's just speak. I don't know a single one of us who would sit in our house and go, honey, would you look there? Our neighbor's house is on fire. Oh, boy, what are we going to do? I don't know how to say this to them. Like, hey, Mr. Smith, your house, no, I wouldn't say. Hey, Mr. Smith, have you ever invested in life insurance or fire insurance? You know, who does that? You see someone's house, it's not about what you say. You'd go, hey, your house is on fire, get out. And that's what Jude says. There are some people that you treat more delicately, and some you just grab them and yank them out of the fire. And I don't know if we're doing that because we're too worried about how to say, what we're going to say. That's not nearly as much. I know we need to be tactful, but I'll tell you, we need to make contact and not just worry about tact. And then here's the last thing that I want to ask you to do, and I want you to open your Bibles, and we'll do this in the last, I can't see the lights. The way the lights glare on that clock gives you a good reason to go longer. But is it close to 1:15? Pardon? Okay, thank you. Yeah, oh, I didn't even see that. It's that preacher blindness, I guess. Wow, you didn't see it either? Yeah. Okay, let me show you some practical, put in your pocket, take home, think about tools for evangelism, and it'll come straight from the book of Acts. In Acts, we have Philip who is going to go preach to the Ethiopian eunuch, right? He's been in Samaria doing a great work, and God calls him away, and he goes down and he finds the Ethiopian eunuch. He preaches to him, and he obeys the gospel and so forth. Okay, so what happened in that? Have you ever analyzed that and looked at a couple things that might help us? Here, write these down, or I may have them in the outline or whatever. But here's what happens. Number one, Philip made himself available to God. God came to him, or the angel, verse 26, and says, Now an angel of the Lord spoke to Philip, saying, Arise and go toward the south along the road which goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza. This is desert. And Philip said, Well, I can't do that. I'm busy today. No, that's not what he said. Lord, I'm doing a great work here in Samaria. I mean, the apostles have even come down from Jerusalem to lay hands on people. This work is thriving. I don't have time to go running out in the desert trying to find one guy. How many preachers would leave their congregations where it's cushy and nice to go to a little place? That's basically what God's asking Philip to do. You leave your good work that's thriving, and I want you to go out in the desert and minister to one person. And he goes. See, we got to be able to say yes to God. When I was a kid, my dad preached for over 60 years. And I was a teenager, and we had a congregation, I guess, of about 350, probably very similar to this. And they used us a lot to do the Lord's Supper and prayers and all that kind of stuff nearly every week. And I got picked on a lot, I guess, maybe because I was the preacher's son or whatever. And I remember one deacon came up to me one Sunday and said, Hey, so-and-so didn't show up. Can you lead the closing prayer? And I said, No, I don't want to. Well, as I said that, my dad walked by. He heard. And church is over, and we're sitting at the house. The routine, we would watch the Steelers while Mom's cleaning up supper and or lunch. And my dad and I are sitting there in the living room, and he said, Hey, Steve, I heard you. I heard John ask you if you'd lead the closing prayer today, and you said no. And I said, Yeah, I didn't want to. And he said, Well, just think about this. You didn't tell John no today. You told God no today. Because he needs and needed someone to pray and to engage this worship service. And you told him no. I just want you to think about that. He never corrected me. He never told me I did the wrong thing. He never said, you better never do that again. But I've never done it again. I mean, I go in places and they always ask, as a preacher, sometimes you just want to go to church and not be like, hey, will you do this and do this and do this? And I just want to sit with my wife. I never get to sit with my wife. And but I will never tell them no. Because I'm not telling them no, I'm telling God no. Don't tell God no. If God calls on you, answer his call. Let me real quickly no, I don't have time. Man, I'll try to think of it later. Second thing, he had initiative. Look at what else it says in verse 27. So he arose and went, and behold, a man of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority under Candace, the queen of the Ethiopians, who was in charge of her treasury, and he had come to Jerusalem to worship, was returning and sitting in the chariot. He was reading Isaiah the prophet. Then the Spirit said to Philip, Go near and overtake the chariot. This is not the way it came down. God didn't tell Philip to stand by the corner of the road and stick his thumb out. He had to run and overtake the chariot. Did you see that? That takes initiative. The chariot wasn't running his direction and it'd catch up with him and pass him. He had to go run it down. Sometimes you have to invest yourself, inconvenience yourself, put forth a little effort. All right, here's the third thing I see that Philip did. He started where the eunuch was. Look at verse 35. Then Philip opened his mouth and beginning at this scripture, preached Jesus to him. He was reading from Isaiah 53, and Philip began where he was. I had a lady call me one time and say, can you come and teach the Bible to me? And I knew that my associate was teaching her the Bible. And I said, well, what's going on? Why do you want me to? And she said, because we're going through this lesson that he has, and all my questions he won't answer because he wants to talk about Genesis, and God created the world, and there's Jesus. And she said, I believe all that. I want to get to this. I don't argue any of that with him. I believe all that. But he won't talk about anything I need to know because he has this program he's trying to run me through. Can you just like study with me and answer my questions? Philip began where the guy was and taught Jesus to him. Look at the next thing that we see here. He had tact. You see, when Philip ran to him in verse 30, he said, do you understand what you're reading? And the guy said, well, how can I, lest someone guide me? Philip didn't say, wait, you don't understand that? Are you kidding me? I mean, my kids know that. You don't know that? What kind of, you've just driven all the way from Ethiopia to get to Jerusalem and you don't know that? We need to be tactful with people. There's going to be a lot of people that don't know near as much as you do. Don't rub their face in it. I had a lady I was studying the Bible with one time, and she stopped me in the middle of the Bible study and said, you keep talking about being lost. I don't even know what you're talking about. What I thought, surely everybody knows what it means to be lost. She was clueless what I meant by that expression. Should I humiliate her, or should I be tactful and try to teach her what I was talking about? Philip was tactful. And then he also had courage because he ran to him. He heard the prophet. He heard him reading the prophet Isaiah. And who took the initiative? Sometimes we have, I'm going to the barber shop today, and I'll tell you what, if the barber speaks about Jesus, I'm going to open my mouth and tell him what I think today. That's not the way Philip did. Philip didn't just stand there waiting. He never asked me anything, so my opportunity's passed. He took the initiative and brought the subject up. Do you understand what you're reading? Sometimes we have to get a little outside of our comfort zone and bring Jesus up, introduce him into our conversations. And then the last thing is that he preached Jesus. He didn't preach the mark of the beast. He didn't preach, did Adam have a belly button? He didn't preach, on and on and on you go. I mean, how many people want to get sidetracked on all these things that are peripheral when people are dying? They're losing their soul. They need to obey the gospel. Preach Jesus. And that's where he started, and that's what he did. And I don't know of a better example as to how to reach the lost than to incorporate some of these principles we see lived out in the life of Philip. If we do those things, we'll make a difference in heaven and hell for some people. By being true to the gospel of Christ and the doctrine of God, we'll not only, as Paul said, save ourselves, but we'll also save others also. Appreciate your attention.
Thanks very much, Steve. That's I don't know about you guys, but when you're talking about being a little timid about sharing your faith with people when the opportunity comes up, it got a little warm in here for me. I don't know what the deal was, but it's eye-opening to hear just to hear the practicality of what we all, we've all heard probably 100 times the account of Philip, but to think of the practicality of what Philip did and how we can apply that's so useful. I don't know about you guys, but like I said, I've been challenged already. I'm hoping tomorrow is easier. It's Saturday. It's supposed to be an easy day, But it's been good for me. It's encouraging to hear those reminders that, you know, that sharing our faith isn't always sitting down with, you know, book, chapter, and verse and a Vine's concordance and knowing all the right words and all the right things to say. It's sometimes helping the neighbor take out the trash or do whatever you have to do, and then taking those opportunities and walking through the doors that God opens for us. And Steve, appreciate you pointing those things out. This is going to wrap us up for the night. Let me encourage you to please be back tomorrow. I want to say this too. You guys, it's such an encouragement to me to see you guys here. I mean, it's the preacher person inside me starts to go, well, this person, wish this guy, wish this. And I don't want to do that, because it's so encouraging to see you guys who are here on a Friday night who could be doing any number of other things. But it's so great to have you guys here, to be in this fellowship, this time of study and growth together. And I don't mean eating pies, that kind of growth. I mean, that probably happened too, unfortunately. But and let me remind you again about the prayer request. I know I'm kind of beating that over the head a little bit, but we will take some time tomorrow after our final lesson, and we will spend some time in prayer. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it's hard to just throw something out that's heavy on your heart. But we need to do that. We need to be willing to pray with each other and pray for each other and pray on each other's behalf. So in the back there are some baskets that just have some paper sitting next to them. If there's something, and it doesn't have to be about you, it's just something that you want us to pray about. Just write it on a piece of paper and put it in those baskets, and we'll deal with those tomorrow. Speaking of tomorrow, we will start at 9 o'clock in the morning, but we will at 8:30. We'll have coffee and some continental breakfast type stuff. We have some pastries, a little bit of fruit and stuff. If you're a fruit person, that's like I was telling Steve Goddard that I had that cherry cheesecake, so I could tell my wife I had fruit tonight. But we will have coffee and pastries and some juice and stuff. So come early in the morning if you want to, if you're able to, and we'll just have some time to fellowship again and visit with each other. Luke, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Would you close us out with a prayer? Luke Carter is going to come up and lead us in prayer. For those of you who don't know Luke, he preaches over at the Nampa congregation. Again, thank you guys so much for being here. I know there's so much other stuff you could be doing, but it's an encouragement to me, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the elders. I know it's an encouragement to them that the investment that they put into this as a development thing for our congregation, that you men support it. If you're going to be here tomorrow and you know somebody that isn't going to be here, give them a call tonight. Send them a text or shoot them an email or whatever, and just say, hey, love to see you tomorrow. But we will start 8:30, have stuff in the fellowship hall. We'll begin at 9. We have 2 sessions tomorrow, and then we'll have our prayer session, and then there will be lunch tomorrow. If you haven't signed up for lunch and you want lunch, stay. There's going to be plenty of food. We're getting barbecue from Big Daddy's across the street. We've used them several times doing stuff here, and it's like every time we use them, they're like 6 pounds of meat becomes 7. Their full pan of mashed potatoes ends up being this big, and it's gigantic. So if you haven't signed up for lunch and would like to stay, feel free to stay. And if there's somebody you want to invite tonight or remind tonight, and they want to stay for lunch, feel free. But again, thank you guys. Thank you, Steve. You guys make every effort to be back here in the morning. Luke, if you'd come up and close us out in a prayer, and we'll be back here together in the morning at 8:30 or at the latest 9 sharp, as Richard would say.